You have an idea, a goal, something you want to try, but you don't start, not because you don't have time, not because you don't care, but because somewhere in your mind there's a voice asking, what if I fail? What if you try and it doesn't work? What if you put yourself out there and fall flat? What if people see you fail? What if you discover you're not as capable as you thought? So you don't try, or you sabotage yourself before you really begin, or you stay so busy with safe, comfortable things that you never get around to what actually matters. This is fear of failure, and it's one of the most powerful forces keeping people from the lives they want. The irony is that by avoiding failure, you guarantee a different kind of failure, the failure of never trying, never growing, never discovering what you're capable of. Today we're talking about fear of failure, what it really is, where it comes from, how it controls your life, and how to move forward despite it. What fear of failure actually is. Fear of failure isn't just being nervous about something not working out. That's normal. Fear of failure is when the possibility of failing prevents you from trying at all, or causes such intense anxiety that it sabotages your efforts. It shows up in different ways for different people. Some people procrastinate endlessly. They want to do something but keep putting it off, finding reasons why now isn't the right time. The procrastination protects them from the possibility of failure. You can't fail at something you haven't started. Others perfectionism themselves into paralysis. They research forever, plan endlessly, wait for perfect conditions. They tell themselves they're preparing, but really they're avoiding the moment when they have to actually try and risk failing. Some people self-sabotage. They start something, then unconsciously undermine their own efforts. They don't show up fully. They don't follow through. They create reasons why it won't work. This way, when it fails, they can say it wasn't really a fair try. Others simply avoid entirely. They don't apply for the job, don't ask for the date, don't start the business, don't share their work. The fear of failure is so strong that staying where they are, even if they're unhappy, feels safer than risking failure. Fear of failure often disguises itself as something else. I'm being realistic. I'm waiting for the right time. I need to be more prepared. It's not a priority right now. These sound reasonable, but underneath is often just fear. What makes fear of failure so powerful is what failure means to you. It's not just about the thing not working out. It's what you make that mean about you. If you fail at starting a business, that's just an event. A business didn't work. But your mind doesn't stop there. It says, I'm not capable. I'm not smart enough. I don't have what it takes. Everyone was right to doubt me. I should have known better. The fear isn't really about the business failing. It's about what that failure will confirm about you. All the worst things you secretly believe or fear about yourself. Failure becomes proof that you're inadequate, incapable, not enough. It's not just a setback. It's a revelation of your fundamental unworthiness. That's why the fear is so intense. You're not just protecting yourself from disappointment. You're protecting yourself from what feels like existential threat to your sense of self. Where fear of failure comes from. Understanding the roots of this fear helps you see it clearly instead of treating it as truth about your capabilities. Childhood conditioning. Much of fear of failure starts early. How did the adults around you respond when you made mistakes or failed at something? If failure was met with criticism, disappointment, or withdrawal of love, you learned that failing is dangerous. You learned that your worth is conditional. You're valued when you succeed. You're not when you fail. Some parents have high expectations and show disappointment when children don't meet them. The child learns, my value depends on achieving. Failure means I'm not worthy of love. Other children experience harsh criticism or shaming around mistakes. They learn, failure is humiliating. I must avoid it at all costs. Even well-meaning parents can create fear of failure. Constant praise for being smart or talented teaches children that their worth is tied to these qualities. When they encounter something difficult, failure threatens their entire identity as a smart, talented person. Early experiences of public failure or humiliation. If you experienced embarrassing failure, bombing a presentation, failing publicly, being mocked for a mistake, that experience can create lasting fear. Your brain remembers failure equals humiliation. It overgeneralizes from one experience to all future situations. Now any potential failure feels like it will result in the same humiliation. Perfectionism. If you believe you need to be perfect to be acceptable, failure is terrifying. Any failure proves you're not perfect, which means you're not acceptable, which threatens your entire sense of worth. Perfectionists often have intense fear of failure because their standards are impossible. Failure is inevitable when perfection is the requirement, so they live in constant fear of the inevitable. Cultural messaging about success and failure. We live in a culture that celebrates success and hides failure. You see people's achievements, not their struggles. You see successful outcomes, not the failures that came before them. This creates a distorted view where successful people never fail, and failure means you're not cut out for success. Neither is true, but the messaging is powerful. Social media amplifies this. Everyone shows their wins. No one shows their losses. You compare your behind-the-scenes struggles with everyone else's highlight reel and conclude that failure is uniquely your problem. Tying worth to achievement. Many people learn from family, culture, school, that their value comes from what they accomplish. You're worthy if you're successful. You're not if you're not. When worth equals achievement, failure isn't just a setback. It's a threat to your fundamental value as a person. Of course, you're terrified of it. Fixed mindset about abilities. If you believe your abilities are fixed, you're either good at something or you're not. Then failure is proof you're not good at it. There's nothing to learn, no room to grow. You either have what it takes or you don't, and failure reveals you don't. This mindset makes failure feel final and definitive rather than part of a learning process. Previous failures that weren't processed. If you failed at something in the past and never processed that experience, never grieved it, learned from it, or integrated it, it remains a raw wound. The prospect of failing again feels like reopening that wound. The old failure wasn't just an event that happened and passed. It's still alive in you, creating fear around anything that might repeat it. How fear of failure controls your life. This fear doesn't just make you uncomfortable. It actively shapes your choices and limits your life in concrete ways. You don't pursue what you actually want. You have dreams, goals, things you genuinely want to do. But fear of failure keeps you from pursuing them. You stay in the safe job instead of trying the thing you're passionate about. You don't start the project. You don't make the change. Years pass and you haven't moved toward what you actually want because the fear of failing at it is too great. You'd rather not try than try and fail. You play small. You only do things you're confident you can succeed at. You stay in your comfort zone where success is guaranteed. You don't take risks, don't stretch yourself, don't attempt things that challenge you. This keeps you safe from failure, but it also keeps you from growth. You stay small not because you lack capability, but because you're protecting yourself from the possibility of failing. You sabotage your own efforts. When you do try something, fear of failure can cause you to undermine yourself. You don't prepare fully. You don't show up completely. You create escape routes before you even start. This way, when you fail, you can say, "I didn't really try," or "the conditions weren't right." The failure doesn't count because it wasn't a real attempt. But you still don't succeed, and the fear remains unconfronted. You quit at the first obstacle. You start something, encounter difficulty, and immediately interpret it as evidence you're going to fail. So you quit. You tell yourself it wasn't right for you, or the timing was wrong, or it's not that important anyway. Really, you're just avoiding the possibility of failing by getting out before failure can happen. But this means you never push through difficulty to get to success. You need everything perfect before you start. You can't start until conditions are perfect, until you're fully prepared, until you have complete certainty of success. Of course, these conditions never arrive, so you never start. This perfectionism before starting is just fear of failure in disguise. If you never start, you never risk failing. Your decisions are driven by fear rather than desire. You make choices based on avoiding failure rather than pursuing what you want. You take the safe path, the guaranteed option, the low-risk choice, not because it's what you want, but because it won't result in failure. Your life becomes about risk management rather than aspiration. You're not moving toward anything, you're just trying not to fail. You miss opportunities. Opportunities require risk. New job, new relationship, new venture, all involve uncertainty and the possibility of failure. Fear of failure makes you pass on these opportunities. You stay where you are, even when you're unhappy, because at least you know you won't fail at what you're already doing. You experience chronic anxiety. Living with intense fear of failure creates constant background anxiety. You're always worried about potential failure, always scanning for threats, always trying to prevent anything that might not work out. This vigilance is exhausting and keeps you in a perpetual state of stress. Your self-esteem suffers. When you constantly avoid challenges because of fear of failure, you never build evidence of your capability. You never prove to yourself that you can handle difficulty, overcome obstacles, or recover from setbacks. This erodes self-esteem. You start to believe you actually can't handle failure or challenge, which makes the fear even stronger. What changes when you face fear of failure? When you learn to move forward despite fear of failure, specific things shift in your life. You pursue what actually matters to you instead of just what feels safe. You stop letting fear make your decisions. You move toward what you want instead of just away from what you're afraid of. You take more risks and try more things. You're willing to attempt things even when success isn't guaranteed. This opens up possibilities that were completely closed before. You grow faster because you're willing to challenge yourself. Growth requires pushing beyond your current capabilities, which means risking failure. When you can do that, you develop much more rapidly. You build genuine confidence based on evidence that you can handle difficulty, not just evidence that you avoid it. Real confidence comes from failing, learning, and continuing anyway, not from never failing. You become more resilient. When you face fear of failure and discover that failure isn't actually devastating, you develop the capacity to handle setbacks. You learn that you can fail and recover, which makes future failures less frightening. You experience less anxiety because you're not constantly trying to prevent failure. You accept it as part of trying things, which removes the constant vigilance and worry. You stop sabotaging yourself because you're not desperately trying to avoid failure anymore. You can show up fully, give genuine effort, and see what happens. Your decisions become clearer because they're based on what you want rather than what you fear. When fear isn't driving, you can evaluate options more rationally. How to work with fear of failure. You can't eliminate fear of failure completely. Some fear around risk is natural and even useful. But you can reduce its control over you and learn to act despite it. Separate failure from your worth. The most important shift. Failure at something doesn't mean you're a failure as a person. These are completely different things. You tried something and it didn't work. That's information about that specific attempt in that specific context. It's not a revelation about your fundamental value or capability. Practice thinking. That didn't work, instead of, I'm not good enough. Focus on the specific event, not your global worth. Redefine what failure means. Instead of seeing failure as proof of inadequacy, see it as data. Every failure tells you something. What didn't work? Why? What can you learn? What would you do differently? Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the path to success. Every successful person has a history of failures they learned from. The difference is they kept going. Start asking, what can I learn from this? Instead of, what does this mean about me? Examine the worst-case scenario realistically. Fear of failure often involves catastrophic thinking. You imagine failure will be devastating, humiliating, permanently damaging. Ask yourself, what's the actual worst that could happen? And if that happened, could you handle it? Usually, the worst case isn't as bad as your fear makes it seem. And yes, you could handle it. This doesn't eliminate the fear, but it reduces it to more realistic proportions. Remember past failures you survived. You've failed before. At many things, probably. And you're still here. You recovered. You moved on. Remind yourself of this evidence. You have a track record of surviving failure. The next one won't destroy you either. Focus on process, not just outcome. Instead of defining success only as achieving the outcome you want, include process goals. Did you try? Did you show up? Did you give effort? Did you learn something? These are within your control, unlike outcomes which often aren't. When you can feel successful for trying, regardless of outcome, fear of failure loses power. Take small risks first. You don't have to immediately attempt the thing you're most afraid of failing at. Start with smaller risks where failure feels manageable. Each time you fail at something small and survive, you build evidence that failure isn't catastrophic. This makes bigger risks feel less terrifying. Expose yourself to failure deliberately. This sounds counterintuitive, but controlled exposure helps. Try things you might fail at. Fail on purpose sometimes. Apply for things you probably won't get. Attempt things that are hard. The more you experience failure and discover you're okay, the less power the fear has. You realize failure is uncomfortable but not devastating. Develop a growth mindset. Shift from I'm either good at this or I'm not to I can develop abilities through effort and learning. With this mindset, failure isn't proof you lack ability. It's part of developing ability. Everyone who's good at something was once bad at it. Failure is expected in the learning process. In the next video, we'll dive deeper into practical strategies to develop growth mindset in your daily life, specific exercises, techniques, and habits that transform how you think about your abilities. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Create support systems. Talk to people who won't judge you for failing. Build relationships where failure is normalized and supported. When you have people who will support you through failure, it becomes less frightening. Avoid people who will say, I told you so, or make you feel worse. Surround yourself with people who understand that trying and failing is better than not trying. Celebrate trying, not just succeeding. Give yourself credit for attempting things, for taking risks, for showing up, not just for succeeding. Every time you do something, despite fear of failure, that's worth acknowledging. This reinforces that your value comes from your willingness to try, not from guaranteed success. Recognize that avoiding failure is also failing. Here's the uncomfortable truth. When you don't try because you're afraid of failing, you're already experiencing a kind of failure. You're failing to live the life you want. You're failing to discover your capabilities. You're failing to grow. The failure you're afraid of is at least active. You tried and it didn't work. The failure of not trying is passive. You never even gave yourself the chance. Practice self-compassion when you do fail. When failure happens, treat yourself kindly. Don't attack yourself. Don't catastrophize. Acknowledge it's disappointing without making it mean you're defective. Talk to yourself the way you'd talk to someone you care about who tried something and it didn't work out. That compassion makes failure less painful and less scary. Keep perspective. In 5 years, will this failure matter? In 10? Most failures that feel enormous in the moment become minor blips when you have distance from them. This isn't about minimizing real disappointment. It's about not inflating temporary setbacks into permanent disasters. Conclusion. Fear of failure keeps more people from the lives they want than actual failure ever could. The thing you're afraid to try because you might fail. What if you succeed? What if it works? What if you discover you're more capable than you thought? You'll never know if you don't try. And not trying guarantees the outcome you're afraid of. You definitely won't succeed at something you never attempt. Failure isn't the problem. Failure is information. It's feedback. It's part of learning and growing and becoming capable. The problem is letting fear of failure make your decisions. Letting it keep you small, safe, stuck. Letting it prevent you from pursuing what you actually want. Every person who's accomplished something meaningful has failed repeatedly. The difference between them and people who don't accomplish things isn't that they don't fail. It's that they try anyway. You can fail and recover. You can learn from it. You can try again. Failure isn't fatal unless you let it stop you completely. The life you want is on the other side of risking failure. You can stay safe and certain, or you can try and maybe fail and maybe succeed. Both have costs. Choose which cost you're willing to pay.